only 5 after. But I want to welcome you all to Friday Night at Egan. This is our 5th one this year, and this is a real opportunity. Normally in the fall, before the first symphony, we have Kyle Wiley Pickett do something about what's coming up on the symphony. And this year he suggested, well, why don't we do something about broader topic about the arts? And I think he called it Big Arts in a Small Town, and that's the name of it for tonight. I think that's really neat, and he invited Linda Rosenthal and Art Rotch to be here tonight. And I think we're all looking forward to a great panel to, discuss the arts in small community. And of course, I think for some of us, we got to experience that as well tonight already. It's Friday night, first Friday, and I was down at the art opening down at the Jack, and of course, all the folks are getting ready to sing and so on. So it's just one of these towns where you can't go anywhere, where you don't have conflicts. And of course, Art's got a show going on tonight as well, and so it's just it's one of those amazing things in Juneau. You can't have a night where you don't have some conflicts. So, well, let me just talk a little bit about these 3 folks. And so Kyle was recruited first in 1999 to be here. That was his first season. Born in Los Gatos, California, bachelor's degree in music from Stanford, master's in choral conducting from California State University, Chico, and he pursued and received a doctorate of musical arts from Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore. A lot of you already know this about him, but some may not know that Kyle is also an accomplished flautist. And we need to have you play one night with you. Should have you and Linda play, and that would be good. So he's been with the Juneau Symphony this whole time since '99. Kyle and his wife and 2 young sons live in Northern California, and I was surprised. It's amazing when you start thinking how old you get, because he said Ned's in 1st grade. Can you believe that? I mean, that's hard to believe. I remember when Ned was born, and it just seemed like, it goes fast, Kyle, so stick with it. It's fun. Juneau Symphony is celebrating its 50th season. One of the things that I wanted to do in my introduction was talk about partnerships, because I think that's part of this whole thing of why things work in Juneau. So I went and dug out Mel Flood's first contract at the university. So, because that was how the partnership with the university started, was when Mel was hired here in '82. That's when we started. Half of his job was to be the conductor of the symphony. Half of his job was to teach music here at the university. So we've essentially been in this partnership with the symphony for 30 years. And the last 3, we've been the prime sponsor for the symphony. So we're proud to do that, and we're proud to be a part of that. And then Linda Rosenthal, as I say, most of you know all these things, but Linda's lived in Juneau since 1974, in Alaska since 1969, founder of Juneau Jazz and Classics, a music festival now in its 27th year. I've been involved with Linda for 26 of those years. And again, Juneau Jazz and Classics could not have formed without the partnership with UAS, because Linda, as part of her work here at UAS, became the music director for the festival. And that's how we started, and Linda and I worked together when I was Dean of Arts and Sciences and on through her retirement. But it's been wonderful, and this year, great things coming, and the festival is from May the 3rd through the 18th this year. They've gone to 2-week format a couple of years ago, and it's been very successful. So, and maybe Linda will talk a little more about that. She received her honorary doctorate in main letters from UAS in 2005, but she also has a doctorate in music education that she got, I'm trying to remember now, it's back to 70, anyway. But she's performed all over the world. She also, thing I most have loved about Linda's years in Alaska is she's done these performances in all these villages all over Alaska, bringing music to the bush, to rural areas. It's been remarkable. And I remember when she did the thing with the storytelling and the playing music, and did it in the schools throughout Alaska and even in the lower 48, and particularly Washington, D.C., right? I think you had the performance down there. So remarkable. And again, Linda's also the artistic director of the Lake Placid Chamber Music Seminar for adults in upstate New York each summer. So this is something you may not know. She plays on a violin made in Turin, Italy in 1772 by G.B. Guadagnini? Guadagnini. So pretty amazing. Anyway, and we love having Linda. She usually does a Sound of Music thing each year. We couldn't work it out last year, but look for it. We're working on a time where we'll do a Sound of Music thing again with Linda in the spring. Art Rotch, Executive Artistic Director, Perseverance Theater. Art's in his 5th year as Artistic Director, but he first worked for the theater 24 years ago, served on Perseverance Board for many years, holds a degree in History from Harvard, MFA degree in Theater from New York University's Tisch School of Arts, founding member of the board of the Tisch Design Alumni Association. Liz and Douglas with his wife Akiko, and theater artist. Art is a set and lighting designer. That's when we knew him back when he was working for the theater, of course. One of only a handful of designers to lead a regional theater. Art has also served as a grant panelist for the National Endowment for the Arts and the Rasmussen Foundation. And he commissioned and produced at Perseverance Theater the premieres of Battles of Fire and Water, remarkable, play, and with 3 different languages. And if you didn't see it, it was incredible. And I don't know if it's been we ought to put it on the road again because it is remarkable. I just don't know anyone done like that in my lifetime, at least, that I've ever seen. The Blue Bear, of course, too, outstanding performance, and been involved with Luann Schooler and Leon Inglesrud. Presently at work on a play about William Paul and the Alaska Native Land Claims movement with local writer Ishmael Hope. And of course, the other thing that Art has done is really, it came in with a little bit struggling Perseverance for, in their history. And Art really has put it on a sustainable footing, particularly by expanding it with the Anchorage connection. And everything I hear from Anchorage, I have family in Anchorage that say that it's great in Anchorage. I think this season it will be great again. We also have a partnership with Perseverance Theater, and have since I was a Dean of Arts and Sciences 20 years ago, and that's having the theater professionals teach our theater courses here at the university, as well as we have a partnership for the summer programs here at campus. And it's been a great partnership, and we continue to, as I say, for 20 years to have that partnership, and it works very well for both of us, and we hope to have it for many years to come. And we have a very, a good group of students who are in that program here at the university now. It's not as big as I'd like to have it, but it's always about a dozen students, and I think in the present play, that we have one of our young students participating in that at this time and getting credit for it as part of that. So anyway, I just want to thank them, all 3 of them, for the partnerships with the university. We could not be as rich as I consider us to be a small public, liberal arts university, and you can't do that without having the arts. We don't have as strong a curriculum programs at the university, but we have very strong partnerships which enable students to really be a part of the arts community here. So thank you all, and I'm going to turn it over to Kyle, who's supposed to be kind of the coordinator of the thing.
Thank you, John. And before I say anything else, after hearing John's introduction, actually, I think one of the themes that's very clear about doing big arts in a small town is that all 3 of us have benefited enormously from the support of UAS. And so, John, thank you for your continued support. Okay, can you all hear okay? I have to lean down here to be into the microphone. Thank you all for being here tonight, and especially thank you, Linda, and thank you, Art, for joining me this evening. I'm really pleased and humbled to be up here with 2 great colleagues, and again, after John's introduction, I'm sharing the table with some impressive people, which is something you all know, but I'm really glad to have you here with me to talk about this. I've given I think I'm now on maybe number 9 as far as talks out here at Egan. So I've talked out here a lot of times, and one of the things that's become clear in these talks is that the question and answer portion tends to go on about as long as the talk. And those of you who come to my talks know that my talks keep going longer and longer too, and I keep promising to end them in time to have questions and answers. So I promise tonight that we will end the formal part early enough to take questions and comments from you here. The other thing is that I'm intending this to be less of a talk or lecture than just a conversation with the 3 of us about the topic of doing big arts in a small town. And before we get going, I just wanted to share how I came about to be thinking about this subject. And it really came from 2 places. I do a lot of talks to Rotary clubs and chambers of commerce and various civic organizations. I do them here. If you've been at Rotary, you've seen me. I know you've seen these 2 as well. And of course, there are 3 Rotary clubs in this town. And my other orchestra, the North State Symphony, actually covers 3 towns, which have anywhere from 3 to 5 Rotary clubs in those towns. So as you can imagine, I do a lot of Rotary club talks. I haven't even done the math, but it's a lot of Rotary Club talks that I do. And when I do my Rotary Club talks, someone like John always gets up and does the introduction. And when I'm down south, they always mention, Kyle conducts the symphony up in Juneau, Alaska. And everybody kind of gasps for a minute. And then they always, in the question and answer period, say, so you go to Juneau, how many times do you go to Juneau? And what's it like to go to Juneau? And actually in my talk down south, I brag quite a bit about Juneau. And one of the things I say about Juneau is, yes, they have an orchestra, but not only do they have an orchestra, we have a student symphony, we have 2 opera companies, we have a jazz and classics festival, we've got a multitude of theater companies, including a regional professional theater and Perseverance Theater. And so I get to brag on this community quite a bit, and people marvel at that, particularly about the aspect that this town has 30,000 people and no roads leading in or out. And that is significant because, in Northern California, when I'm conducting a symphony in Redding, people can say the same thing. You have a symphony in Redding? I thought that was just cowboys up there in Redding or lumbermen. And the answer I can give there is that, well, I have players drive up from San Francisco. They come from, Sacramento and Stockton, or from Humboldt. I mean, I'm an I-5 orchestra. The North State Symphony is an I-5 orchestra, and my players come all over, on I-5 to get to come and play with us. But in Juneau, we don't have that option. We don't have an I-5 coming in and out of Juneau. We do fly some people in, but we have a thriving arts scene in a very small, isolated town. And the other thing that led me to be thinking about this is that last year I gave a TED talk. If some of you may or may know the TED organization that does these talks, and if you go online, you can find the talks. And I actually even thought about playing the talk that prompted it, and then I realized we should just talk, and then you can go home and watch it online if you're interested in seeing it. But when you give a talk for the TED organization, it doesn't get to be as freewheeling as I like to be. They want to know what you're going to say exactly down to the second before you do your talk for TED, which means you have to give it to them 4 or 5 different times, and they give you notes, and you give notes back, and it is definitely not my working process, I'll tell you that, for giving talks. But it ended up in an interesting place because they wanted, in this particular TED conference, they wanted to talk quite a bit about community. And as I was prepping, they said, you're a great person to talk about community. I mean, you work in different communities, you talk to people in different communities, you bring 2 communities together with the North State Symphony with 2 towns that are spread apart. And I said, yeah, I'm a great person to talk about this. And I went home and I started writing, and I said, I'm not a great person to talk about this because the community aspect of what I do is secondary to the arts. The community part, what I was doing, or what I think about myself doing, is not trying to create community. It's rather than that, it's using the resources of the community to create art that in turn is for the community. But and so I pushed back on the TED organization for a while, but then finally came around, and particularly to the notion that creating big arts in small communities is kind of an audacious process. I don't want to overuse that word. It's a word, audacity is a word that gets overused. But there is an audacity in doing what the three of us do. And a very important element of community that is involved in what it is that we do. And so that brought me to, the subject of big arts in a small town. And so I want to start the conversation off by throwing out something that people say to me and then letting you respond to this, both of you respond to this as well. When I was a couple of years ago, we did Mahler's Second Symphony here in Juneau, the Resurrection, which is an enormous work, enormous forces, enormous chorus. Everything about that piece is enormous. And when I talk to colleagues, friends of mine who are in grad school, friends who are in various parts of the United States, they said, "You did Mahler too in a town of 30,000 people with a community orchestra?" And they said, "What, are you crazy?" And how did you do that? And can you even do that? And of course, if any of you saw that, you know that was one of the greatest triumphs, I think, of the Juneau Symphony. And then the question is, well, why Juneau? And so I'm going to offer that question to both Art and Linda, because you've both been here for many years. All three of us are working in organizations that have been here for many, many years. And so the first question is, why Juneau? Linda, why Juneau?
Oh, please. Go.
Okay. Why Juneau? Why do I live in Juneau? What brought me to Juneau?
Why do you live and do art here in Juneau?
Oh, okay. Well, as John mentioned, I first came to Alaska with my husband Paul, just as we finished being students, so we thought, and we went directly to Fairbanks for reasons which would require another Friday night. But anyway, we actually just intended that to be a pass-through kind of a year between being students and going probably back to New York and doing what professional violinists do, whatever it turned out to be. And we got to Fairbanks, and somehow we just felt like the luckiest fiddlers in the world. We got there, and after being with a rather intimidating teacher, people just welcomed us with open arms and welcomed our violinisms, respective, and we had these incredible opportunities to play concerts, and this is the first time we didn't have a teacher hovering over us, and we could actually get out there and perform recitals and just cut loose with all the repertoire that we had learned over all these years. And not only that, we were so lucky to come at a great time. It was the early 70s, 1969, and just when the state was becoming prosperous, and when there was money to spend on the arts. It was just incredible, the opportunities to perform and especially to tour, what John was saying about going out to the villages. I mean, I've been to every nook and cranny of the state, and I was so lucky, and that was my first job with the university. I was hired by Statewide Services to go out and teach a music appreciation course. I mean, I'd never taught such a thing in my life, but the nice thing, what really appealed to me was that I was expected to give a concert at the end of each one of these courses. So I'd teach for 4 nights. The 4th night would be our last night. They'd have their little exam. And the 5th night, I gave a concert for the community. And it was just... So I was doing this so many weeks out of the year, just week after week, going to Nome and then all the villages outside of Nome, Kotzebue, all the villages outside of Kotzebue, Prince of Wales Island, and of course around Juneau especially. This is where I'm getting to why Juneau. And somehow it happened. I found myself coming or being requested, I guess, by the communities near Juneau and the Juneau, what was then the community college, to just give more and more courses. I gave the music appreciation. I had spotlight on Beethoven, spotlight on opera, spotlight on Wagner. I just had to keep creating more and more one-credit courses, which was also quite thrilling to me. And then these concerts and concerts. So at some point after, in 1974, it was the head of the community college just said, Linda, if you lived here, we could actually put you, make you maybe not a full-time faculty, but you could be part of the faculty and we'll work you into being more and more full-time. And so it started at 40%, 60%, 80%, and finally 100%, all starting in 1974. So, and I just loved Juneau. I mean, back in when I first came here in 1970 to do a concert, I just fell in love with Juneau, and that was so I just these opportunities to come back, and I was just thrilled to that this was the place, and I've never looked back. And part of that too was the fact that I felt here that there were these opportunities. It was jazz and classics wasn't even on my mind at that time, but there were just the thriving arts community already. It just seemed like you just roll up your sleeves and the sky was the limit, and I really had that feeling here in Juneau, and just that anything you just dream a dream, and it can happen right here. And so that's why Juneau for me.
Art, yeah, that's great, Linda. Thank you.
Great story.
Art, you not only, I'm the same question as why Juneau, but also I know that you left for a while and then came back to Juneau. So you've chosen Juneau twice now.
Right. Or it haunts me, I don't know. Well, the simple answer is Molly Smith, who was our founder. But I think the difference in my experience is that I came to Alaska, Anchorage actually, when I was a very young man, not quite sure what I wanted to do with my life, and Alaska was a good place to have an adventure and explore some things. I was not, I studied history, which doesn't teach you a lot about drafting or painting scenery, any of those things, and I didn't feel particularly well prepared to work in the theater, even though I had been doing a lot of that. So, and I came in 1988, which those of you who were in the state at that time, it was not an auspicious time to move to Alaska at all. But I, through the now dead Alaska Repertory Theater, I networked with Molly Smith, and in Anchorage in '88, people were a little shell-shocked, and the theater was about to close, and it was a pretty oppressive environment. But down here, the theater was growing, and Molly was a really dynamic leader, and I had a temporary gig at the theater, and I was going to go to law school, and I said to Molly when she offered me a permanent position shortly after that, I said, well, I'll stay for another year, but I've got these other plans, and I think I'm going to do something else. I think I'm going to get out of this field, probably because I'm interested in staying in Alaska, and I was worried that it wasn't a really viable career to be in the arts. And she's very wise. She said, you don't have to give me a time limit. You can stay here as long as you like. And when you're ready to go, you'll go. And when, if you're not, then you can stay and just see if you like it. So that was very wise. And 10 years later, she left and I stayed. And then a few years after that, I applied to graduate school because I figured, well, in my interview with Susan Hilford, who's one of the great designers in the field, she's won the Tony Award for designing Wicked, really, really one of the greats, and became my mentor. When I interviewed with her to get training, she said, you've been doing this for a long time, why do you want to get training? And I said, because I can always forget everything you teach me and be the artist that I am now, but I will never know what I would have to offer if I had training in this. So that's why I left, was to get training. As far as why Juneau, I've worked in a lot of other small places. I developed a little bit of a fetish for working in small communities. In Nevada City, California, I did about 6 productions at a little theater there that is now closed. The Lake Tahoe Shakespeare Festival was a favorite of mine. Several operas in Aspen, Colorado, wonderful place to work. Aspen is a great little place. Stonington, Maine, which is kind of the Sitka of Maine, right down to the dormant volcano out in the harbor. Beautiful place, population of about 4,000 people. It's a lobster town. All of them are great, but Juneau is really special, and Molly, I think, also summed it up for me, where she said, in Alaska, people tend to ask why not when you have a crazy idea instead of why, and her origin story of perseverance is probably relevant too, where She was a graduate student in Washington, D.C., where she now, of course, lives, and asked a number of theater consultants. She said, I'm going to go back to my hometown, and I'm going to start a theater. And in the mid-1970s, it was an ideal time to start a professional theater. There was a real boom in the regional theater movement. There was a fair amount of funding. There was real population growth, and the baby boom generation was coming to the age where they could buy tickets to things and start things. And all the consultants she spoke to said, great idea, perfect time, you're a dynamic person, do it. Now, tell me about your hometown. She said, well, it's Juneau, Alaska. Well, how big is it? 18, 19,000 people at that time. What about the greater Juneau area? You know, so when that was explained to the experts, they all said, you know, I'm sorry, but there is a math problem here, and it's just, you know, the kind of theater you're trying to build, a professional theater where you pay your actors and you bring in some guest artists and you train people, all those things, it just costs too much for a population that size to sustain. And the myth that's growing up around Molly is that she can do the impossible. And having known her for 24 years, I've seen her hold magic wands, but they're props. They don't actually work. What she is a really tenacious and gifted leader who ran into a community that says yes. And that's why Juneau, because we tend to say yes here.
Yeah, great. Well, I'll tell you, when the first answer for me of why Juneau is because that job was open when I was applying for jobs. And but when I was offered the job, I thought a lot about, you remember when Garrison Keillor came to Juneau? Some of you probably saw that. And his story from Lake Wobegon is one of the most famous of, you know, the one that he told here in Juneau is on the collections on his CDs that you could buy. And I remember listening to that one. And one of the things that he said about, and of course this is all fictional storytelling, but there's truth to his fictional storytelling. And one of the things he said about in that Lake Wobegon story is that when you go to Alaska and you say you want to do something, no one asks you if you have experience doing that. No one checks.
Very true.
If you say I can be a symphony conductor, they say okay. And if you do it, they say great. And I have found that that's actually a very true thing. And so if you say, I want to do Mahler's Second Symphony, and you have a board member who says, I don't think that's going to work. Nobody here is going to go see Mahler. Nobody knows Mahler. And you say, no, trust me, it'll work. They say, okay. And you do it. And you show them. And so that's part of what I like so much about Juneau. And I think it is an Alaskan trait. I've worked in a lot of small communities, too. I contrast everything with New York City. And it's not a truthful contrast because New York is such a huge, I mean, there is no one New York, but we all think about New York as big-time arts and everywhere else is small-time arts. At least that's what the New Yorkers think, right? The New Yorkers think that that's big-time arts and everything else is small-time. But one of the things that I really like about being able to work in a community like this is that as a young conductor, and I still hope that I consider myself a young conductor, it's changing gradually, but as a young conductor, the first time you do something, it's nice to do it outside of the glare of the critics. Now, on the other hand, we don't really have critics anymore, so I mean that's also another completely different Friday night talk. But you know, there was a time certainly where you were really in the glare of critics every time you tried something new. And again, in Alaska, you say, I'm going to do this, and they say, okay, and you do it. And you don't have to answer to a critic, and you can learn and develop, and there is a laboratory element to that I think is very useful to an artist, to be able to stretch and experiment and do it without risk or criticism. And so that's part of what I like so much about Juneau. So let's go on to a couple other things. You both, and the Symphony too, I think, and it should be said, the Arts Council. I should have asked Nancy to join us too, but we'll run into time problems with just three of us. But you both have done big things. I mean, big ideas that you might say that even in Juneau, someone would say, hey, wait a minute. And I mean, obviously, Molly ran across that. So
those consultants weren't in Juneau.
Those consultants weren't
in
here.
Washington, D.C.
Right, they were in D.C. So let's just start with this. What's a project that you've done here that you might not have been able to tackle somewhere else because of the naysayers? Something that seems really outside of or bigger than a town like this should or could be able to support. Either of you want to start on that?
Well, for me, because I'm primarily I'm trained as a professional violinist and I tour and I perform, for me, I don't know that I would have become I don't know that I would have started a music festival. I don't know if I would have become an impresario, whatever. I don't think I would have become a presenter. I don't think if I were living in New York, I don't think I would have started my own series. So this whole wearing the artistic / executive director hat for me is something that is just could only happen in a small town and probably in fact only in Juneau.
Okay, well, let's talk about that for just a second. So when you did decide, I mean, how did you come up with the idea of doing a jazz and classic series? I mean, combining those things together in one festival of event, essentially, or week-long event for Juneau.
Right. Well, before I started Jazz and Classics, I had I'd been invited to participate in many festivals all over the world, actually, and so I've kind of watched. I love going to music festivals and being a part of them. There's just something wonderful, exhilarating about them, and I just. Well, first of all, let me give you one quick answer. The best chamber music festival already existed in Sitka, so that was so there was really no need. I mean, my specialty, of course, is would you think? Well, I would do chamber music festival, certainly just at least a classical festival mixed with chamber music and whatever, but. So we really didn't, it didn't seem necessary to have that. But actually, I think even if there hadn't been a Sitka festival, and if the director hadn't been my very own husband, I think I still would have gone for something a little bit broader, because I've been to festivals where jazz and all kinds of different music genres were presented, and I just love that interaction. Among the musicians, among the jazz musicians, and all the arts. I've been to festivals where they just have like 25 different disciplines, and it's just so energizing. And I think that I started with jazz and classics because actually that was what I was. I saw that work in Fairbanks, and then it got into something just, it's a gigantic festival now with way more than jazz and classical music. But I think I just thought it would be a good fit for Juneau. And I don't, it just, even now I look back and I said, would I have done anything differently? Should I have started as a chamber music festival or just done my own field? And I don't think so. I just think that the mixing the audiences, mixing the musicians, and having all that within a very short period of time. We started out as 5 days, then we expanded to 10 days, and now we're 16 days. So I think that that excited me personally. Interaction.
Did you get pushback? I mean,
yeah.
So tell me about the pushback. I mean, that's kind of where I'm interested, because that's where I think we are different than other places.
Yeah. Well, the first thing was it was the 80s. The art was referring to the dismal, whatever the economy was in just horrible shape, and that was the first. It wasn't even the audacity. It wasn't so much about jazz and classical music, but it was like
$10 a barrel.
Yeah, how dare you even think of it? And people they were actually angry at me for that. Just like how could you think of that right now when we're all struggling so much? And you have this idea and you feel passionate about it. And I said, I don't know, the time is now. And the fact is there were many others who were just part of that team, that initial team, Bob Banghart, Mike Stanley, just so many. There were a group of maybe 15 of us that got together one night and says, let's just start this. Let's declare ourselves a board. We got our, and yet the money funding was it was scary. It really was. But I don't know. I was very impractical, and I just didn't think of that because it was something I wanted to do, and I just said the time is right for me, and everybody else is really enthusiastic about it. And we had, Bob and Mike brought in great jazz artists, and I knew I had so many connections in the classical world, and I was so excited about bringing them to Juneau and exposing them to Juneau audiences and having them be a part, see what this community is like. The way I feel when I go to other beautiful places, and I was just excited about having Juneau meet them and enjoy all this splendid stuff. So anyway, yes, there were people who just said it won't be well received, and you won't get any money. But we did, we did very well the first year. Yeah. And I just think, if you have the passion for something and the really believe in it and can be still somewhat flexible, just be able to work your way through things. It can happen.
Let's come back to the impractical thing in a minute, because I think that's an interesting word that you used, and I think it does relate to what we're talking about here. Art, what about you? I mean, something that you've done here that you might not have tried maybe in, Nevada City or New York,
Yeah. Well, I can think of a project, but I would also say the same thing Linda did. Just going to work as an artistic director is a little weird, and it's because of my background. Most artistic directors are trained in directing, and then probably have had a career path where they did something to prepare themselves to run a theater. That's not what happened to me at all. And when I was sort of encouraged to apply for the job, and I pushed back on that and said, isn't it going to be a little weird for a designer to even apply for a job like this? And it was one of the founders, and Molly herself, and then a past board chair, actually the current board chair too, but a past one, all said kind of the same thing, which is, don't worry about it being unconventional, because we're an unconventional organization. You're not going to get questions about that. You're just going to get practical questions about how would it work. And they were absolutely right. The questions weren't, could this work? Just how would it work? Talk to us about how it would work. And so that was, and that would not have happened at other theaters. I talked to, there is a fairly well-known journeyman regional theater designer like I was, who runs a small company in Maine now, and she's the only other person like me. And I asked her, what was your process like to prepare for mine? And it was completely not the same, because they were all about it can't work, and she had to sell the idea that as a designer, that the discipline doesn't matter. What matters is every theater artist has to focus in a particular place. That's the nature of the beast. But none of that happened here in Juneau. It was very different. But then a project is, we recently, I don't know how many of you know the book, The Golden Spruce, the John Valent book, The Golden Spruce. So we recently secured the rights to adapt that for the stage, and it's not, if you were here when we talked about The Blue Bear was another book that we adapted, and it is not obvious how to adapt that book, and it worked out well, but it meant finding people who didn't think you couldn't adapt that book, because the book has no conflict, and it has no dialogue, and it has only two characters. It didn't really make sense. And the Golden Spruce is another book that it is not obvious. I think there is a play in there. We'll find out. You never know with these things. But it is not obvious how to adapt it. And some of the same team that worked on The Blue Bear is working on The Golden Spruce. And when I approached Leon Inglesrud in particular about it, who was the co-adapter and director of The Blue Bear, I said, it's another one where I know there's a play in here, there's a great story in here. It's not really obvious how to get it, but take a look at it and see, because I think you'd be interested in it. And his response was, not only to say, well, you and I don't seem to have that edit function where, the book, if it doesn't clearly have a play in it or the structure is challenging, we don't say no. And then he said something that I think is really pertinent to what we're talking about tonight. He said, and neither does your audience. Your audience will show up for this. They're going to give you a chance to adapt this thing. So let's do it. And so we're getting started on it. It's great.
Yeah, great.
Never would have done that in Nevada City.
Yeah. In the Symphony, we've definitely done. I mean, if you look at the course of the last 10 years, really, actually, probably the last 8 years. I would say the first 2-3 years that I took over were building years, in the sense that the symphony, the players and I were building a relationship together where they were learning to trust me, that what I asked them to do, they would be able to do. And then we had a turning point where we played Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And one of the things that was great about that particular moment, that was in 2003, Beethoven's Ninth Symphony is played everywhere. It's played all over every orchestra, it gets played everywhere. But it had never been played in Juneau. And so to get to do a premiere of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony in your community is a pretty neat thing. And of course, we'll be reprising that this year as part of our 50th anniversary celebration. But after that performance, I felt like we turned a corner where the players in the symphony, anything I put in front of them, they say, "Okay, we'll do it." And I think there is a difference between that attitude here, and Linda, you know about this, you having played in a lot of orchestras. I mean, you see players kind of look at you skeptically sometimes, in big orchestras especially. The kind of, who's this guy and what's he going to do? But when I said to the orchestra that we were going to play Mahler 2, they said, "Okay." I mean, I don't mean this at all pejoratively, but it's their experiences, and almost all of them, their experiences entirely with the Juneau Symphony, or at least for the past decade. And so they don't have the experience to know that that's probably something they shouldn't be doing. In the same way that if you were an I-5 player playing all those different I-5 orchestras, you'd say, "Oh, they tried to do that in Fresno, and oh, that was an awful mess that it was," And so, again, I come back to that Mahler 2 performance, which was, probably too big, too enormous of a project to do, and again, Art, like your comment about the audience too. The audience also doesn't say, "Oh, I heard that was a big mistake in Fresno when they tried to do Mahler 2," and so they come and give you the complete benefit of the doubt, and so you have an atmosphere that allows for experimenting and failure if you need to get to something great without prejudgment, I think.
I think I just. I don't know how many of you had the pleasure of hearing Zool Bailey, but can you imagine, presenting, just forgetting who Zool is now, we all know who he is and everything, but just in the abstract of presenting all 6 Bach suites in one evening. I mean, most people, if I proposed that in New York or anywhere, it was just like, are you nuts? Who would? In fact, a lot of people, said that to me. I don't think anybody will come hear that. It's not, really. And, now it seems preposterous because, everybody, so many people showed up. People loved it, and it was, just a huge success. But, first of all, I know Zool, and I know the star power he has. But the music, that was a scary thing for me, though, to decide to do that. I know, but it really was because just as an abstract thing, it's hard to sell the 6 Bach suites with a lone cellist up there. It's, people think, ooh, what am I in for? At least with chamber music, with an orchestra, it's just, but with a lone cellist, it was just, anyway, I was scared because of the way people responded to you're doing what? And, but then, of course, it's up to, you have to market these things, and people warm up to the idea, and then pretty soon it becomes the thing to do. You can't not be there.
Right.
So, and I think, too, with it's that trust. I think then after a while, a certain amount of trust, you You just have to rely on it and say, oh, people, we've made people happy enough times. I hope they'll really believe me when I say this is an experience you don't want to miss. So that's in Juneau only.
Well,
here.
interestingly, going on with the Juneau audience, when I'm down south, people say, oh, sure, you do Mahler too, and everybody goes because they're in Alaska, there's nothing else to do. And we know all three of us know that is so false, that in fact, when we are scheduling our events, we can't believe how many other things happen the same weekend as our concert. We wish there were a lot less to do in town. But obviously there's so much going on that people have enormous numbers of choices to make about how they're going to spend their time going to entertainment.
And it's because it's the why not factor. Everybody has that attitude. We say, oh, I can do this, I can do that. All the organizations. Think of what's going on tonight, and the fact that we all have things happening, and I have to soon go to Swingin' in the Rain with Barney McClure, and hope you all trickle in there too.
Okay, here's a question. This is a question comes from I won't name names. Someone who works in theater in this town, and sometimes for you, Art, and sometimes for other people, and sometimes for me. Which is, how do you balance small town resources with the big project ideas and needs that you have? For example, the outside resources, inside, bringing people from outside versus using people from inside, and not to mention just physical limitations of everything needs to come in on a barge. If it's big. Art, you want to start on that?
Sure. Resources could mean a lot of different things. So let's look at Of Mice and Men. The personnel, there are 10 actors. 7 come from Juneau, 2 from Anchorage, and 1 from Oakland, California. And that's what I like to call the secret sauce. That having a couple of professionals that have come into the community tends to challenge everyone who lives here to bring their A game. And that's really, really helpful. So in the rehearsal room and on stage, having particularly Charles Branklin, who plays a supporting role beautifully in Of Mice and Men, he's a professional. He's from outside. We want to look good for him. It's great. And then having the couple of guys from Anchorage come down really is helping us with, we've sold half the tickets for the Anchorage run of Of Mice and Men already and have done no advertising. So that's a little secret sauce. So the mix, I think, having people come together in the room, and what theater does better than anything else, I think, or live performance art does better than anything else, is bring people together into a room. And that applies to the rehearsal room as well as the performance venue. So personnel, there should be, for an ideal Perseverance project, I think, a mix of people from here and from elsewhere. And we take the best people that we have, and then we fill those gaps so that, we have a Lenny that lives here, and that guy should get to play Lenny. He was born to play that role, right? If you've seen him, there's no question about that. There wasn't a George, an obvious George. Well, let's find him a George. And what a great thing that we found a George who lives in Anchorage and went to school with our Lenny. That's great. So that's the personnel piece. And then the thing that's been a challenge for Perseverance, if you think of resources being money is tough. And that's what the consultants that we're talking to Molly about mean. And in a good year, we will see around 10,000 admissions to a main stage season, which will pay for about 22% of $1 million operating budget. And those are the hard economic realities of trying to operate a professional theater, where that $1 million is paying mostly personnel. It's going to pay your staff and your performers and your directors and your other artists. And they're not working at scale. They're all working for less than they would make anywhere else. So we've been really fortunate over almost the entire life of the theater to because we're in Alaska, because we're in a place where there isn't that much access to professional theater, we can get investment from outside. And so the Mellon, you can look at a list of funders. There are some very large national funders behind Perseverance Theater. And what we're trying to do in the future to diversify that revenue base and turn that 22% number into something more like 40 or 50 is just sell more tickets to more people in Alaska. And one of those places is the idea of working in Anchorage. Another is doing something in the summer months. And that our long-range plan is all about how can we grow our audience base from that 10,000 admissions to 20 or 30, where we'll catch up to the buying power of the dollar, because our budget has been in that $1 million range for 20 years. That's the challenge, and the economics, I think, really are a challenge, and each organization is going to have their own solutions. But those resources are tough. Partnerships really help. There are good artists that live here because they choose to, and they do work for less, and we appreciate that. But
plus, I'd say Perseverance is responsible for a lot of people moving to town.
correct. Yeah,
I know a lot of people who
who
come up and then stay.
Yeah.
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 Linda, what about you?
Well, our mission is to bring artists in, professional artists, to Juneau. And in that way, we're more like the Arts Council's, Nancy's series during the year, and we're that's our mission. But a really important part of our mission is education and outreach. So when our artists do come to town, there's a lot of interaction with local people. For instance, tonight we have Barney McClure, our professional jazz pianist, coming to town. He's been here all week working with Juneau singers and getting ready for this evening of a cabaret tonight. And so when artists do come to town, there's that interaction. We always have workshops. We send artists into the school, and I guess to me it's just our mission is to bring in professional artists, but then while we have them here, it's mixing it all up with the community as much as possible, and that includes finding venues that are a little bit unusual, going into the community, finding venues where people gather. I mean, that's all that matters, like the state office building, anyway, so I guess that's in the resources. I mean, I think for us, there have been a couple of major scary moments for me, where I really worried, like when we went from a 10-day festival to a 16-day festival that took us, but what that is basically a festival that spanned 2 weekends to a festival that spanned 3 weekends. And that was, how to sustain that. But anyway, that worried me the first year we tried that. And also starting this kind of Legends series that we just had last year with Taj Mahal, committing this rather sizable amount of money to one artist, which I can't tell you how much of that our artistic fee, our whole budget that took up. I mean, it was like, ooh, look how look all we're just dedicating to bringing him here. And anyway, so that was scary. But what it did, though, was, it increased our audience. It got the festival, I thought, off to this really energetic, it created a great excitement leading up to the festival, and kind of just launched the festival in the most wonderful way. And it turned out our attendance went from, I think, like 8,000 the year before last to 10,000 this year. And that's a sizable increase. And also we reached, with all the artists over the course of the 16 days, we reached like 4,000 kids. We just sent all the artists who went. We had the extra days just gave us time to do more outreach and reach more people in the community. So this year was a real jump with that, and the resources. You just have to really be careful to match your dreams. Just keep things. Just be realistic, I guess.
Yeah.
Take chances, but to know that you have the resources to do what you want to do, and a lot of that, artists. I can't have this artist, but I can have this artist. Limited resources, and you just trade-offs that you're making when you're designing the season, all based on the available resources you have.
Yeah.
So.
With the Symphony, we're a little bit sort of between. Well, we're a little similar to Perseverance in that we have to balance the in-town performers with out-of-town performers, and then we're similar to Linda, to you as far as soloists, because when we bring in soloists to play with the Symphony, we're talking about out-of-town performers and budgets, and we wanted to bring Yo-Yo Ma up to play this year. We all do. Yeah. And then I talked to his agent, and I found out how much he was going to cost. What
did he tell you?
It was $100,000.
That's what I got to.
For one performance.
Yeah.
But we also had to fly him in a private jet. And so when we got to the private jet part, I just kind of, my head was on the desk. So no, we didn't. Yeah. We didn't bring Yo-Yo Ma this year. But who needs to when we've got Zool Bailey coming to town, right? What we do with the symphony is our mission is in two parts. One is it's to provide high quality symphonic performances for the community, but the second part of it is to provide a platform for local musicians to play. And so we have two, I wouldn't say they're conflicting goals necessarily at all, but we have to maintain the quality of what we're doing, and give as many opportunities as we can to local folks. But we also need a critical mass of players. And so if we only have 12 or 13 local violinists available for a particular concert, and we need to really have 20 violinists, that means that we have to bring 7 violinists from out of town. And so in general, I've tried to maintain a policy that when we have a qualified local person, we use that person. And then just fill the spots that we can't fill with qualified local people. And there have been, exceptions here and there to that, but that's our general policy of doing that. But I also find that what you do, Art, which is the people who come from out of town, really do inspire the local folks. I mean, the level of our playing comes up when we bring a great soloist in. And then the other thing that I try to do is we try to maintain the same group of out-of-town players every time. So rather than have ringers, ringer gets a little bit of a pejorative term. Someone who just comes in at the last minute, we pay them and their bucks and they play and they go. We've tried to create a group of out-of-town members of the Juneau Symphony. So it's the same people who come back time after time, and then they feel like they're part of the orchestra. And when you're watching them from the audience, I hope that you feel like they are, that is the Juneau Symphony up there. And that necessarily changes because, people's availabilities will change. And also, Art, like you, we've gone to almost exclusively Alaskan musicians from Anchorage and Fairbanks. There are still a few who come from Seattle area. We used to bring a lot more from Seattle, and now, and that's partly a budget-driven thing. We can get them here so much cheaper from Anchorage than we can from Seattle now, so that they're almost, and they're good players. Yeah, yeah. Okay, let's do this. Let's do one more question, and then we'll, or one more topic, and then we'll ask if people have questions. And that would be, let's see, out of these, how about one that I didn't write down and give you to prep? How about, what is the limit? What is the limit? What is something that you might think of that you might change your mind and say, I just can't do that because of resources or because of scheduling or because of things that are available to you?
The first thing I think is that the limit is really my time. And I think if I decided I wanted to make...
so let's say you wanted Yo-Yo Ma.
Yeah. I think I'd go spend every day, every hour trying to raise that money to get Yo-Yo Ma. And I think I could do it. And if I just decided to, okay, I'm not going to practice, I'm not going to do this, and if just deciding how I want to spend my time, I think I could do it, because I mean, Juneau would, it might not be that hard, actually. Let's say, no, really. I mean,
no one's going to tell you no.
Yeah, no. But the thing is, people are with somebody like that, with a great name like that. People are just eager to see it happen, and it's very possible that there's just somebody or a corporation, just some bodies out there that would just say, how much will it take? Let's do it. Let's make it happen. So, oh my God. Well, maybe I don't have to. It started right here. Yeah. So I think it really is just because I do feel like if I wanted to expand the festival, like by weeks, or make it a Southeast a touring festival, or have it go have a part of it during the year, like have a Juneau Jazz and Classics in January, Juneau Jazz and Classics, some other time of the year. We could do it. I can't think of anything. Wow.
It's Alaska. You can do whatever you want.
You can do it. Yes, yeah.
Art, what do you think?
You almost can't do anything. It's probably time and space for me. For example, there's a piece that I've been procrastinating about turning down, and it's a co-produced world premiere of a Canadian playwright that's a pretty beautiful, beautiful piece. And we're just not going to be able to put it in because there's 2 or 3 other new pieces, and we can't do a season of all new pieces. You know what I mean? It just isn't. And this playwright and the theater that is committed to her and is looking for a producing partner need an answer, and I have to say no. And that sort of breaks my heart because I'd like for you to see it. And it's a Canadian writer, and it's in the far north, and there's a lot of things that are analogous. And I think it would do well, but we just can't do it on the time frame that would work for these people. So I have to say no. So we are limited to 5 productions a year for the moment, and that means certain decisions. And then the other reason that we often say no, not always, because Oklahoma is an example of a show that really doesn't belong in the theater that it's being produced in. But the theater, if you've been there, it's a little limiting, and there are certain things that you can't do. And when I hired Matt Aller, who was a classmate of mine at NYU in set design to design Oklahoma, he said, "Hey, you're a designer. How am I going to design for a designer?" And I said, "Well, you're going to solve the space because that's going to be enough of a problem." He said, "What do you mean?" Because Mice and Men has got 4 locations, 4 sets. And he said, "Okay, well, where does the scenery go? It's all got to be on the stage, man. It doesn't go anywhere because you can't fly it out, you can't drop it down, you can't roll it off. It's all got to be there. So you got to figure out a way to make all those locations happen within that room." And that is a thing that we often just, maybe once a year we'll do something like Oklahoma, which is going to work. But some shows have to really take advantage of what's good about the space. So like an architectural room, or nothing, or that sort of thing. And you can't have a steady diet of shows that really look like they want to be in a different kind of theater. So those are probably the 2 things. We could solve both of those when we put our minds to it. We could build a new theater, or we could expand our season, but that's going to take years of work. And it is certainly something we're talking about.
I think with the Symphony, our limitation is people time. Because if you think about what we do 4 main stage concerts a year, average of 60 players per concert. There is about 40 hours of rehearsal and performance to put on that show. So that's 2,400 people hours per concert. 10,000 hours of volunteer time per year, not including the practice time that the players put in. That when we have talked about whether we could add a concert or something, the players have generally said no. And that is probably the limiting factor for us. And that's a difference between an orchestra here that is primarily community-based orchestra and professional orchestras, because pretty much if you're an I-5 orchestra, if you have the money, the players will show up for the rehearsals and performances. I mean, you could do a concert a week if you had the money to pay people to do it. And when it's a volunteer kind of organization, you're at the limitations of what your people can put out there. So I think that's probably the main limiting factor that we see. Okay, we would like to thank you, both of you, for talking with me and for talking about this. I know, Linda, you do have to scoot pretty soon, but let's open up for any questions. We have a microphone, and so please, if you have a question, put your hand up or something, and the microphone will come to you.
Hi, I'm Natalie Rothaus. I've been in this community a long time, and first and foremost, I want to thank you all, including the university, because it's incredible your commitment, to Juneau, to Southeast, to the state, and we've all tremendously benefited from it. And as I've been hearing you talk, one thing foremost is that the 3 of you are artists, and that you've never forgotten who you are and your commitment to yourselves and to what you need to do in your vision. And also that I kept hearing commitment and appreciation and trust and education, which is, I think, also vital to the arts, that we have to remember if we want your future participants and artists and supporters, that I think so much of it starts and remains with education. So my question is, as I sit here, and this is a night where a lot is going on, a lot of us have been here many years and we're aging. And as I go around to wherever when I travel, I see a lot of aging audiences. And I have two kids now who are in their 20s, so I guess they're not kids, but they'll always be my kids. That so many young people, they might occasionally go to live performance, but that's also so much of what you three are about and what you're doing. And I think that there's that appreciation for attending live performance is going by the wayside. And what do you three see with your organizations that you're going to be able to do to engage young audiences? I mean, I understand when you say that you've, like Linda in particular, just your example of how you had 8,000 and now you have 10,000, and I think that's tremendous. But what are we collectively going to do to continue to get people to come to support the arts?
Let me jump first, and then I know this is something that we all three think about, and you're right. I mean, we are in the business. I mean, we have a passion for this, but this is also our living, and so it's in our great interest to have people want to continue to pay and come and see performances of music. Three things. One is that I think Juneau is a great example of a town that is not quite following the trend. When you look out at the Symphony audience, you see a much more diverse group of ages than you see down south. There are a lot more young people and a broader spectrum, not quite so much a sea of gray hair. Nothing wrong with a sea of gray hair, but not quite so much of that in Juneau than elsewhere. The second thing is that this has been a concern for a long time, I mean a century. For a century, people have been saying, the Symphony audience is all old and dying. But the truth is the average age of the Symphony audience has been about 55 for about 100 years. And there are a lot of reasons for that. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old reason for why we don't go out very often. And in fact, you find that when people's kids reach high school age, that's when they tend to start going back to performances because they don't have to find a babysitter. And people in their 50s tend to have a little bit more disposable income. They have a little bit more flexibility. And so in the Symphony crowd, that tends to happen. But the area of great concern for me is that the biggest predictor about whether someone does start going to the Symphony in their 50s is if they played an instrument sometime younger in life. If they did, the likelihood is pretty high that they're going to go see not just symphonies but any live music. If they didn't, the likelihood is low. And we have a little bit of a lost generation. It's my generation. It's a little bit of my generation and the 10 to 15 years behind me. So the people who are from 25 to 40 are a little bit of a lost generation on the playing instruments because that's when the school budget cuts happen and that's when they cut music from the schools. It's gone back in large part due to research that says that you want your kids to do better in math, you give them an instrument. But there is a window that's a dangerous window for those of us in the arts. And so the kind of things that Linda does, the kind of things that the Symphony does is we try to get kids to see live performance and hopefully get them excited about playing an instrument. Because if we could get them to play an instrument, even for a few years, that will do a lot to ensure that they'll keep coming.
Couldn't have said it better. That's, yeah, I mean, I know too when I look at our audiences, especially for classical chamber music, it's average age is what Kyle said, and but when I'm hiring my artists, I really do factor in who would appeal to a younger audience, and that's just part of the balancing act.
Zool is an attractive guy, isn't he? He's he's got some rock star quality to.
Well, he does, and I mean that just happened.
That's Zool. It just happened.
Yeah, but when I'm planning my season, my festival roster, I do think about that. This year we have she's just turned 20. We have a 20-year-old saxophone player who is a child prodigy. By when she was 11, she was already playing gigs in Boston, and she is just, she's phenomenal. She's got this world. I just looked at her calendar today because I haven't checked her out lately, but she's performing all over the world with her quintet. Her name, by the way, is Grace Kelly, and but she's she's just this rising star. She's arrived actually, and I got her because we got a grant from Chamber Music America to bring her here, because my feeling was that what a great thing. She'll be here in residence for a week with her band, and what a great opportunity, for the kids that she's working with, the high school kids, to have somebody, a role model like that, who's so close, just 2 years, just a few years older than they are, someone so close to their age, already out there. Just she's going to be a superstar. She really is, and she's just an engaging personality. She's a beautiful player, and so I when I saw her, when I heard about her, I said, we've got to have her, whether we get this grant or not, to bring in young people. And so she'll be the Zool Bailey of the jazz. I hope the jazz component in next May. So. Just these are things we all think about and we're all concerned about. But I think Kyle's right. Having played an instrument, even though for like a year, even makes such a huge difference to the likelihood that you'll want to go to attend live music, and it's that appreciation you get just playing having an instrument in your hand, and knowing what it's like. You can just it's very, very powerful. And like Kyle said, music is coming back into the schools, and when it's not, orchestras actually are filling in. Trying to fill in, and here there are other ways the community is jumping in and making it happen, with private funds and things like that. So, is it?
Art, what about the theater? It's maybe a little bit different.
I don't know. I mean, we have some programs. Maybe the theater's mission statement is to create professional theater by and for Alaskans. And if you think deeply about what that can mean, it does mean productions, but it also means sort of investing in the field of professional theater and sort of encouraging the state and providing an example for the state of what it can what can be accomplished when we have a professional performing arts organization here, and trying to lay the groundwork for that to continue, whatever happens to our organization. And part of that's training. And I don't know the figure exactly, but when the budget was around $1 million, we spent nearly 10% of it on training, if you include the internship program. So education and training programs, 10% of the budget. Probably a little bit less because the budget's grown over the last couple of years. But and those training programs include full-time internships for the season, some of which it seems like every 3 years we hit someone who doesn't leave, like Val, who came here as an intern the first time. There's other examples. The partnership with UAS, where we've been able to occasionally spin out a theater minor and pretty regularly come up with an actor who was very useful and very viable. And we're going to graduate Aaron Tripp soon, and Brian Crowder is in Of Mice and Men, and that's been a pretty regular pipeline. The STAR program, which enrolls 50 or 60 kids every summer, and there are graduates of that program all over the place. The advanced training program that we started a couple of years ago in the summer, that is for all ages but more accomplished folks, and some new programs that Shona Starter is working on. And it's a really important investment, because if you don't do it, it's harder to. The people who do it, especially when they're young, whether they play an instrument or perform or work behind the scenes, tend to get addicted to it, and they become zealots, and whether they work in the field or not, they become your best salesman. So it's very, very important. We're lucky too that the school district here is a little bit better than others at keeping some arts in the program, and that's really good. And then to speak to the age of the audience, about 20% of our inventory is available pay as you can. So about 20% of our tickets, we give them away. I mean, the average donation is about $8, so we're getting something back. And those audiences in particular are younger. The other thing that I've noticed, and I don't know if this correlates in music, but the classics, especially the classics done fairly straight up, like Raisin in the Sun and Of Mice and Men, we see a lot of young people there. And we let them know, you're not going to see Of Mice and Men. It was 30 years ago that was in Juneau the last time, and you've heard of this play, you should come and see it. And people of all ages show up, especially young people. I'm seeing a lot of young people there. So that's interesting. And when I was younger, we wouldn't have done them the same way. We would have more likely deconstructed them or reinterpreted them or reimagined them. But do them the way they're written, and they really, really bring people into the theater and build audience for other shows as well, including young people. So that's really been interesting, and I'm not sure what that's about, but it's something that I've observed. That's a great question.
Yeah, it is a good question. Other questions? Anything?
So last year you did the Halloween performance. Did you guys get any bump in young people at that with dressing up?
Yeah, we did Sweeney Todd last year. That was actually another example of a really audacious production for the Symphony to do, for a lot of reasons. One of which is it's kind of PG-13-ish, which you don't tend to think of that with the Symphony at all. Although you probably should. There are things that, and it was a big production to do a kind of a pretty full-scale production with the orchestra on stage. But we saw quite a bit of a variety in who was. I mean, there were a lot of people there who had not been to the Symphony before. There were a lot of young folks there. And this year we're doing a Motown concert in May, and that's also something you're not going to have seen with the Symphony before. And we're hoping that will draw a crowd that is not your necessarily traditional Symphony crowd.
Arlo. You didn't mention Arlo Guthrie coming.
Arlo Guthrie, great. Did I mention that Arlo Guthrie is coming? Opening, I did mention it, right? He is our this year legend. He's our Taj Mahal this year.
Taj Mahal.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah, he's opening the festival.
Great.
Yeah, next year. Thank you, John.
Yeah.
Thanksgiving.
Anything else? Any other? This is your chance to ask any one of us anything. It doesn't have to be just about the subjects that we've talked about. We'll wait for a microphone.
In all the audacity and we can do anything, have you had some particularly edifying failures? That have really advanced your...
Well, you always learn from failures. I mean, or even little things that... Well, I can... Are you guys
go right in.
I can tell you this it depends on who you're talking to. With our blues and our blues concerts, we combine dancing and listening. Just audience people come just to sit and listen, and some just come to dance, and some both. So, I mean, I don't know if this is what you meant, but this is a constant challenge for us to have both going on at the same time. And some of you, I don't know, maybe some of you have been victims to the dancers dancing in front of you, and you can't see the artists, and some of the dancers maybe think the people sitting take up too much room, and just make the dance floor too small. Anyway, I know it's a trivia. It's a small challenge, but we have had people really, really upset with us, and that finally, I think after all these years, we've figured it out, how to make both audiences happy. But I'm not sure. Anyway, that's just one of the.
And we're going to imitate you for the Motown concert. We're going to.
I figured it out.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We're going to do it.
I got it down.
We're going to do what you did.
We figured it out almost with Taj. We got it down with Cowtown, the Hot Club of Cowtown, and then I personally went in and arrange the chairs.
Val will be talking to you.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
Okay.
doing it the way you did it with Taj. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Art, do you want to?
Time to think. You probably can't think of it.
I've had no failure. No, the things that I get mail about don't bother me as much as indifference. That's the worst thing. And there's this play we did that was okay. It did okay, but it was Circle Mirror Transformation. I don't know how many of you people saw that. Beautiful little play, Circle Mirror Transformation by Annie Baker. And it was, friends of mine worked on it at Playwrights Horizons in New York, and Akiko and I went to see it. And it's a beautiful play about a New York actress who moves to a tiny town and enrolls in an acting class. And then she sort of works her way through the men. And it's pretty great little story, and it was amazing to see in its original production, and I was certain that it couldn't miss. And it just didn't really ever catch fire. People who came, I think, enjoyed it, but that was very disappointing to me because I was so excited about Annie, and I thought that we would commission her and bring her here, and she would have a second home in Juneau in 5 years, and it just didn't really catch fire. And I don't know. That's to me, that's the things. Yeah.
I'm actually really, really proud of all of our concerts. There's one that I am still a little bit disappointed in, but that was in 2000, and I still think about it now and then. I still think about. I don't think we did the New World Symphony all that well. Well, it had flaws. But I think the bigger issue for us is what things are. I have felt like the symphony has risen to every single challenge that I put in front of them, and in that regard, no failures. I mean, really, every single challenge I've put in front of them, they've handled. There have been seasons or concerts where they are financially not as good as others, and I don't like to measure our artistic successes or failures based on the finances. But the reality is that we have to be aware of those. I mean, all three of us know this. I mean, that's a big part of being an artistic director, is you're not just an artist, you're an artistic director. You have to be responsible for the entire health of the organization, and that means understanding that probably it's not a good idea in Art's case to do 3 brand new shows in one season. For me, it's not a good idea to do an all Stockhausen year. I mean, it's just not a good idea. Even if artistically it could be great, it's not a good idea. And so keeping the financial aspect in mind, I would say that, nothing failure-wise. We had a blizzard when we did Carmen, and so our attendance was really low. I mean, you couldn't even get into the parking lot at the high school. The berm was 8 feet high, and that was a real financial difficulty. Also, the year we did the Verdi Requiem, which I think was one of the greatest artistic things we've ever did, was on Folk Festival weekend. And it bombed, financially. It was terrible for us. It was really too bad. But I was less disappointed in the financial hit than the fact that there were so many people in Juneau who didn't get to see what I think was one of our real triumphs. So those kind of things, more than stretching ourselves artistically and falling. I mean, I haven't seen that at all. But it's a good question. And the question that I would follow up with Art that comes from Art's answer is, one of the things I like to do when I get together with other conductors is say, okay, what piece did you do that you love and your audience was kind of indifferent to? And because that's sort of an interesting question. There are pieces that those of us who live the arts absolutely live and die by, and the audience says, oh, that was nice. And you just feel like, no, that was the most important, life-changing, earth-shattering thing that you've ever heard.
Annie Baker is the next Chekhov.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
You just didn't know that yet. And so, that might be closer to a failure, is if you can't persuade the audience that something you really believe in is great.
That's hard. That's tough.
Yeah. That's a hard one. That's a hard one to swallow.
It was a well-done production.
So. Okay. Yeah, we've got to let Linda go.
Well,
Thank you, Art.
Thank you.
And I want to add to just that thank you, all of you, for what you give back to this community. It's a wonderful artistic community, but, you know, without you guys, we wouldn't have what we have. So thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Oh, I really appreciate that. Yeah. Art, thank you.
Thanks, Art.
Thanks for staying, Linda.
Oh, sure.
Jump up at
I
8
know,
o'clock.
but, you know, I went to 1:30.
Yeah, you hadn't said our little get-together.